Bike Fit Tuesdays is back, and in today's episode, 5 tips for setting up your gravel bike.
My neck hurts. My hands hurt. This is actually really uncomfortable. This is potentially quite an unpopular statement. I don't like wide handlebars. So there's this thing with gravel bikes that supposedly you need to have really, really wide handlebars to improve control. Now, it's true, wider handlebars do improve control, but it shouldn't be carried out at the expense of ergonomics. I also kind of question, like, if you need that much control, you're probably riding the wrong bike. Like, if you're like tearing down single track on a gravel bike, there's a hint in the name of a gravel bike. Gravel bike. It's not called a single track bike, it's not called a downhill bike, it's called a gravel bike. So why are we riding really, really wide handlebars for more control? Typically, if the bar is wider than you are, and this isn't just specifically related to gravel bikes, but if the bar is wider than you are, you end up reaching around the handlebar to get at the brake lever. So you have more difficulty braking, which means less control. You tend to roll the wrists, which results in quite a lot of pressure or perceived pressure going through the hands. It results in neck and shoulder issues and inability to look ahead, resulting in less control. There are ways of getting around it. There are now flared handlebars that are at a narrower width at the top and they're wider on the drops, which can give you that perceived improvement in control, particularly when on the drops. Something I've found from our bikepacking adventures, that it's with a flared bar, it's easier to kind of get a handlebar bag in there, which is very popular these days. You see a lot of people riding aero bikes with handlebar bags, negating all the aero benefits. Flared handlebar, 38 at the tops and 42 at the drops. There are a number of handlebars out there on the market that will do this. So like I said, you can kind of get the best of both worlds with the flared handlebar. Frankly, most gravel bars tend to be flared anyway, apart from this one, which is a 50 centimeter. Nice one, bike industry, thanks for that. Cue your neck and shoulder issues. Have a think about the handlebar width in general. It's going to be, you're kind of looking for it to be the same width as your shoulders. We've done previous videos that will show you how to measure your shoulders and all the skeletal landmarks that are required, and also to how to fit the handlebar to your shoulder width.
What's a 650B?
Type of ice cream, isn't it?
Knobbly bobbly?
It's not an ice cream. Is it?
Yeah. You've never had a knobbly bobbly before?
Sounds like a Schwaber tyre. Schwaber? That's what you should be calling your next mountain bike tyre. Basically, a 650B wheel is slightly smaller. It's 27.5 inches instead of 28. And the thinking behind it is that you get more tyre clearance because it's a smaller wheel, therefore you can use a larger tyre. The net result is that actually the overall diameter of the tyre, because the tyre on a 650B wheel is bigger, you actually end up with more or less the same size tyre, but it's wider. So I think, in my humble opinion, I think 650B can typically be better for wetter riding. I found it to be better certainly when we were riding through the winter, and I think we had like 2 feet of snow, or a foot of snow, and I was riding a 650B wheel, and
because you've got bigger knobbly bobblies.
Got bigger knobbly bobblies. A 650B wheel is arguably a little bit stronger, shorter spokes, which you can put more tension through. This is why I ride a 650B mountain bike. Ultimately, if you want more grip, a 650B is a better way to go.
Quick little note to add to this section: some bikes aren't officially rated to use 650B wheels. So this Addict Gravel, officially you would void your warranty if you rode 650B wheels in it. The same goes for quite a few production frames because it lowers the bottom bracket, but you can get away with it anyway. Do this at your own risk. To 1x or to 2x? 1x is really popular in gravel, isn't it? 1x means you've got one chainring on the front, which uses a narrow wide chainring profile, which is all about keeping the chain on the chainring better. It's got better chain retention to it, without the need for like a chain device or anything like that to keep the chain on the chainring. So when you're like clattering down a trail, the chain doesn't bounce off of the chainring. Historically, 1x transmissions tended to have a clutch rear derailleur, which basically locks the chain down, stops the chain from slapping. More recently though, with 2x chain transmissions, you can still use a clutch rear derailleur on it, so it's still relatively quiet. One of the problems with a 1x system, in my opinion, is the jumps between the gears are pretty huge. And it's certainly if you're riding longer distances, like, you know, if you're looking at bike packing, for instance, and you're mixing up your terrain, going from road to off-road to gravel to the middle of the jungle, the jumps between the gears can be a little bit too great. So you go from sort of 80 RPM cadence all the way up to 100 just in the change of one gear, particularly if you're running a really wide ratio, because you go from like a 10-tooth sprocket all the way up to, what is this, a 50? 52. I think.
So
crazy.
So you're talking very big jumps in the differences of the chain of the cassette rings per gear, whereas with a 2x transmission you can typically get a wider spread of gears and the jumps between them are much smaller. So I guess for longer distance, more road orientated riding, a 2x transmission works a little bit better. This is the crank that I've just bought for my my gravel bike, which I'm going to be riding when we do our next trip that we're not talking about. I'm a big fat slug these days, so I've got to go down to a 31 tooth inner chainring. Basically means that getting up the mountain passes of the place that we're not going to is going to be made a lot more easy, especially when you've got like bags and stuff on the back and the bike's loaded up and it's a lot heavier, particularly if also, like me, you don't really get to ride your bike anymore and you're not quite so fit. Arguably, add complexity, more gear ranges, well that's pretty much it. So it can be a little bit louder and yeah, that's it.
Having now ridden this setup, which is actually a mullet setup, so the rear derailleur is from a mountain bike, one by system, it is fantastic and best suited to the stuff that's closest to mountain biking. So if you're doing loads of technical gravel, up loads of really, really steep climbs, then 100% one by works really well.
There's nothing wrong with either of them at the end of the day. Neither is better or worse. They're suited to different types of riding, different conditions.
That's the thing though, with modern group sets now having so many gears on the back compared to years ago where it was like 8 speed, 7 speed, all of it is really good. So you can't go too wrong.
There are two distinct types of footwear to be used.
Sandals.
Stop it. What's your name, Lachlan Morton or something? There are two types of footwear. There are gravel shoes and there are mountain biking shoes. Yeah, in case you hadn't noticed, they're the same shoe. Typically we use a mountain bike style shoe with gravel riding because it has a recessed cleat, makes it easy to walk around on when you're pushing your bike up those really steep climbs. Better mud shedding ability from the pedal system. There is no such thing as a gravel shoe. It's a marketing thing. So even my beloved Lake brand, they do a shoe that they market as a gravel shoe. It's the same as this shoe, but it looks different. They're fundamentally the same thing. They use a recessed SPD cleat. We could also argue that the stiffness of the sole is a little bit more important on a gravel shoe on the grounds that you've got a smaller contact patch. So typically, unlike Francis, gravel riders tend to use an SPD system or a mountain bike system, which is a little bit smaller, has a smaller contact patch. Having a stiff carbon sole is a little bit more important because it's going to provide a little bit more support and stability to your feet. This is the most important part of your equipment. It's more important than your carbon wheels, more important than your electronic group set. This is where all the power goes, or doesn't, as the case usually is.
For you.
Something in road cycling stems vary in length. They go from sort of 140mm to down to 60mm. And this is a very effective way of getting the fit of the bike correct, or getting comfortable at least. And having a shorter stem can typically alleviate hand and neck and shoulder issues. But it's worth noting, historically in road cycling, when you put a stem that looks like this onto a road bike, it makes the handling feel quite scatty and erratic, particularly at high speeds. With a gravel bike, the geometries are quite different. So on a gravel bike, you have typically a slacker head angle. So the angle of the head tube here is typically slacker, which tends to slow up the handling somewhat, so the bike's a little bit more stable. The front center is usually longer. They've got more trail on the fork. They've also got a longer wheelbase than a road bike. So you can actually get away with going quite a lot shorter without negatively impacting the way that a bike rides. So furthermore, there are some, and I can't mention any names because I can't actually remember them, but there are some brands out there now that are starting to make very, very long bikes, but that are designed around a very, very short stem. But we're starting to see, certainly in the bike industry as usual, that the lines are starting to be blurred. So we're starting to see gravel race bikes, something that's a bit more race orientated, certainly with the rise in gravel racing. 5 years ago, that wasn't even a thing. Historically, gravel bikes have were sort of derived from endurance bikes. Geometry was very, very similar for a long time, and we're now with the shift to different wheel sizes and wider tyres, the geometry has to change to allow for that. Typically on a gravel position, you don't generally want it to be as long and drawn out as you do on a road bike. You want probably a little bit less weight over the front of the bike on the grounds that you are less likely to kind of wash the front wheel out and low side it. You kind of want the front end higher and the reach a little bit shorter. Again, this kind of dramatically depends on the type of riding that you're going to be doing. If you're going to gravel race, then okay, maybe what I've just said isn't actually correct. But I'd say for the vast majority of the viewers, I suspect we're all just going to go out and want to have a little bit of fun off road rather than some git in a 4x4 trying to murder us on the roads. Experiment with shorter stems.
What's the shortest stem you would go for?
Depends on the size of the bike, depends on the head angle. Unfortunately, like all things bike fit related, it depends on the needs of the individual. 80mm.
That marks the end of today's episode of Bike Fit Tuesdays. I hope you're enjoying this new series. I think this will be the first video to go out. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section down below. If you'd like to book a bike fit with James, I'll put the details in the description down below.
Or any of my stuff.
Or any of his stuff. Bicycle in Richmond. Thank you for watching. See you guys next episode.